We loaded up the trailer with everything we could possibly imagine needing. And that's a lot of stuff. It was already close to 5 in the afternoon, so the sun had long since set when we headed out of town. At first we took the highway, heading southwest, but eventually we turned off into smaller country roads. We passed a couple of small towns and villages out in the countryside before we pushed deeper and deeper into the forest. The road grew narrower with every turn we took, but to our surprise it had been plowed all the way until it ended in a turning area in the middle of nowhere, deep in the old-growth forest. The thick, freshly fallen snow was full of tracks from wildlife moving through the terrain. And the first thing we noticed were the tracks of a large wild boar. We didn't have to search long before we found a flat enough clearing, big enough, near the road, where we could pitch the tent. There were clear tracks from a cow moose and her calf that had passed by very recently. But we didn't have time to amuse ourselves by tracking animals in the snow. We had a camp to set up and half a ton of gear to carry from the car. Even with headlamps, it was a bit trickier to put up the tent in the dark, and the severe cold and snow made everything take longer. You have to keep your gloves on at all times, for example, except for brief moments when you need to tie a knot or fiddle with something that requires a bit of extra dexterity. And you can't touch anything other than perhaps fabric or dry wood with your bare hands. If you touch metal, your hands will burn freeze in seconds. The agreement was that we'd open the first beer once we had the cast iron stove lit inside the tent and the fire pit going outside. Even though it was already 7:45 by then, we allowed ourselves to sit down, relax and enjoy our drink for a good long while. We had pimped the pop-up tent with a string of LED lights that gave a soft, pleasant background glow. And we'd brought along a solid, sturdy kitchen bench so we could cook at a comfortable working height with a proper workspace. We didn't start preparing dinner until around 8:30. And we were in no hurry whatsoever. We chatted and enjoyed the stillness while we pottered about in the camp. It is incredibly quiet in the forest when the snow on the trees muffles every sound. Most people have probably never had the privilege of experiencing total silence, or a night sky completely free from light pollution from nearby towns or settlements. And that's such a shame because it's truly an amazing experience everyone should have at least once. Apparently it was a bit windy that evening, but we were so deep in the forest that we could barely hear a whisper of it. Freddan was in charge of dinner. No slow cooking this time, thankfully. It was thick cuts of beef alternating between frying and resting, later to be sliced before serving. When the food was nearly ready, John and I went into the tent to make it cozy and comfortable and organized. We unfolded the camp beds, organized all the gear and set the table with both a linen cloth and the candelabra. We placed the beds along the walls and stowed all the gear underneath them, so everything looked neat and tidy. The Parmesan cream had developed a frozen crust on the top because it was so cold outside. It was about -14 degrees Celsius and dropping that evening, so we made sure the stove kept burning constantly, spreading a comfortable warmth inside the tent. And finally it was time to eat. We all gathered around the table, hungry like starving wolves. Freddan served a rustic fried entrecote with Parmesan cream and grilled bruschetta with tomato salsa and chopped parsley and garlic. The warmth in the tent made the camera totally fog over after we used it in the cold outside. But after some wiping, I managed to get it clean enough to document the food. That's a new thing, photographing your food for social media before eating. What a great idea! As usual, the wine was a couple of degrees too cold. Way too cold actually, despite the fact that this time we had tried to keep it at a reasonable temperature. We solved that by simply placing the bottle directly on the stove for a couple of minutes, as we always end up doing. And once it was poured into the glasses, it soon reached the right temperature.
Gammalt? Har du köpt, bjuder du på gammalt vin? Nej, men Cotteron från... Ja, Cotteron från Ron. Men... Jaha.
The wine was a Cotteron. From Ron of all places. Can you imagine? And old too. Who serves old wine? We enjoyed it thoroughly. And as always, it was a fantastic meal. The mood was high and there was plenty of laughter and joking throughout the dinner. When it was time for digestives and cigars, way past midnight, we decided to move the armchairs out onto the road in the hope of catching a glimpse of the Northern Lights and maybe even getting a photo of it. Unfortunately, there were no Northern Lights that night, not that we could see anyway. But despite the roughly minus 17 degrees Celsius, the mood was excellent and we had a great time. Well, you can probably see where this is heading, so I think I'll leave it there.